This is the Convene podcast. Today, we're exploring what it really takes to push beyond your limits, stay grounded in moments of uncertainty, and turn a personal mission into a movement that brings people together. My guest is Convening APAC's keynote speaker, Natalie Dau, a Guinness World Record holder, endurance athlete, and creator of Project 1000. Natalie has completed 2 separate 1,000-kilometer runs across Southeast Asia, running the equivalent of 2 marathons a day while raising funds for underserved youth. And she has won every ultramarathon she has ever entered. In this conversation, we talk about the mindset that carries her through the hardest moments, why embracing risk fuels her performance, and how leading with vulnerability can transform teams, communities, and the experiences we create. We start now. Hi, Natalie, and welcome to the Convene podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Running 2 marathons in a day for 12 days requires extraordinary resilience. What mental frameworks or internal scripts do you use when your body and mind both want to quit?
Yeah, I think for me, in those extreme moments of pressure when my body's screaming stop and my mind saying give up, that it's really truly what I learned that I'm made of. So it's about facing that challenge, hitting a wall, but you're still finding a way to push through, even when you feel like you can't. And for me, my whole mindset before I even started was that giving up wasn't an option. I had taken that off of the table. I would make it to that finish line, even if I had to walk 24/7 to get there. And I think, I just kept telling myself in those times to try and put it into perspective. I'm not saving lives and I'm not going to the Olympics. I'm out here doing this crazy thing, but it was me that had chosen to be there and no one was making me do this. So that's sort of what I was repeating to myself the whole time.
Wow. And on top of all that, you've won all 13 ultramarathons you've entered. So, what separates elite performance from highly disciplined, hardworking individuals, you think?
Yeah, I think self-mastery is key. So there's hard work, but then there's, self-mastery is something that's on top of that and just the ability to push on no matter what. And I also think a key to that in any sort of high performer is consistency. It's doing those boring things that people don't notice, that aren't glamorous, that don't get you the immediate accolades, and that are really the hard work things. And I think although hard work is important, you also have to put yourself out there and be willing to put it all on the line and be willing to fail. So I think that's the key difference.
And speaking of self mastery, you've described risk as a catalyst for high performance rather than something to avoid, which really kind of stuck out for me. So, what's one risk you took that changed everything? And how do you evaluate whether a risk is worth taking?
Yeah, so I think if I use Project 1000, I think that was, the most recent biggest risk of my life that I took at, 52 years of age. And I had no idea of what I was doing or where it would lead. All that I knew is that I wanted to prove something, and that was the driver at the time. To me, the downside seemed insignificant to that, and the upside was, in the end, mind blowing. Never in my wildest dreams did I think, I would become a world record holder, have a documentary, win awards and be shown, around the world or get the keys to a city. And most importantly, never did I think that would have such a positive impact on people around the world. So I think taking a risk is definitely worth it if the intention is there.
And you mentioned also not being afraid of failure, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go in being afraid before you start, then I think your chances of failing are definitely much higher. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
I love that. So, for people listening who feel overwhelmed by change, and it can be personal or professionally, What's one small practical decision they can make today to begin building greater resilience?
Yeah, I have a theory that everything we do, and even if it comes down to my training with my runs, that one third of my runs are average, one third are fantastic, and one third not so good. So I think that's in life. We can break things down almost to I'm having a great day, tomorrow's not so good, the one after, let's see. So with that, I take away, and I tell anyone to take away that pressure to perform perfectly day after day and replace it really simply with I did what I could do today, and that is enough. So today, if your best is 20% and that's all you could do, then that is good enough. Tomorrow, maybe it's 90%, then that's good enough. So I think just taking that perfectionism away, helps people actually get started and achieve more rather than using that as an excuse. They're waiting for everything to be perfect before they start or before they go and do that thing, but really just get started and take one step after the other, and your best is good enough for today.
And that touches on the consistency you mentioned, right? Doing the boring things that are not glamorous, but when you do them day after day, then they stack up and make a difference.
100%. If you think I've got a goal and you think about it in a year, but actually, if you do all those things over a 5 or 10 year period, it's life changing. So it can be one tiny little thing you do for 15 minutes a day that actually has a massive impact on your life in 3 or 5 years' time. So don't discount the little things ever.
For me, events and endurance sports both involve navigating unpredictability, right? There's weather, logistics, or human behavior. What did you learn about adapting to uncertainty that event leaders can apply when things don't go as planned?
Yeah, I think both, when I'm doing a massive project and then with event leaders, it's really the same because I'm actually, executing an event almost with some of the things I do. So it's really understanding that you can only control the controllables and you have to let go of everything else. I always say when I'm doing these things, you expect the unexpected and having a growth mindset of adapting and not even thinking about the things that might go wrong that most of the time don't. But, just putting that one foot in front of the other, being present now and dealing with what you can have impact on now and not thinking too far ahead. We all love to plan, which obviously is important, but really the only things that you can control are in the here and now.
And especially when you're in the middle of the event, right? When it's happening, then it's really this second is what matters now. And then you think about the rest.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's being present 100% of the time.
And you talk about finding the signal in the noise, and I love that. So, in the events industry, leaders are bombarded with demands and decisions. So, what practices help you tune out noise and stay locked on the most important signal?
Yeah, so for me, it's almost automating as many small decisions as possible. So for me, if I'm running one of these big event, like these 1,000 kilometer journeys, it's like what I wear, what I eat, the sequence of my morning, all of those small decisions are taken out and it's just what I do every day. So therefore I save that mental bandwidth for the high stakes signals. So, focusing on the outcome that I want, not the problems. And, for anyone, the noise is always going to be loud, but the signal is the choice that you get to make every single day. So you choose what the signal is and you own that choice and you don't make excuses around it. But I think it is really, focusing that mental bandwidth on those big signals that you choose.
And is there in the planning process, do you use AI? Because, AI, we speak about AI now all the time. So, have you found a way to implement AI to take away some of those small decisions, to automate your processes somewhat?
Yeah, for me, because mine is quite physical, mine is just habitual now over years. So if I wake up 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to go for my run, I will put my clothes and shoes out and my sunglasses and know what podcast I'm listening to the night before. So I just have to roll out of bed and execute the next day, and my mind is clear. So, that's advice I always give everyone is just get rid of that low hanging fruit. It should not be taking up any mind share and just move forward. But when it comes to planning, we try and use AI where we can, even if it's calculating what we need or routes or whatever. So definitely in the bigger tasks, but for the smaller tasks, I just find, that's where you build meaningful habits.
And Project 1000 that you mentioned wasn't just a physical feat, it really became a movement with deep emotional resonance. What can event professionals learn from your journey about creating experiences that truly move people?
Yeah, I say lead with vulnerability, not with victory. So engagement, for anyone, especially an event, is always about the highlights reel, but resonance is really found in the struggle. And so I think for me, by sharing the realities of my 1,000-kilometer journeys, the pain, the exhaustion, the moments of doubt, the community just didn't watch a feat. They actually felt the weight of it and felt part of it. So, for event organizers, I would say, it's okay to stop aiming for that flawless execution at the expense of authenticity. Share failures, share the in progress journeys, and incorporate like even behind the scenes storytelling, because then you're opening people's experiences.
And you advocate exactly in that kind of spirit for people to build a platform first, not a pedestal, and shift the focus from the individual to the collective. So, how can event organizers use this idea to foster more community collaboration and shared ownership in their experiences?
Yeah, I mean, a pedestal puts one person above the rest, but a platform lifts everyone up. So for me, if I use the analogy of my runs, I encourage others to join for segments of the run, making them co creators of the journey rather than just spectators. And Project 1000 allowed people to donate, to cheer online, to run a few kilometers. So everyone found their own personal entry point into it. It then resonated because all of a sudden it wasn't this solo endurance test. It was a vehicle for social impact. And people are moved when they see participation as a contribution to a larger narrative or a solution to a problem. So I think, event organizers can do the same, create tiered levels of engagement so people can opt in and feel part of something at their own comfort level, but they get to control what that looks like. And from a social impact point of view, integrate that, with meaning and we as a sort of North Star goal rather than, oh, it's a side note or a charity booth. It needs to be part of the DNA of what you're doing. And then that's when it's genuine. And only then is when people will truly buy in.
Yeah, I can definitely see this in events when you open a bit of room for the attendees to build their own journey and how much more engaged they become.
Yes, exactly.
And same on your long distance runs, you really relied heavily, like you said, both on team support but also on community energy. So, what has this taught you about the power of behind the scenes teams? And how does this translate to event professionals whose work is often invisible but quite essential?
Yeah, so let me just say I would not have made it to any of the finish lines without my team or community. They managed everything so I could focus solely on running. And for anyone, high performance is a result of low friction, right? So the smoother the invisible work, the more the leader can excel or be successful. So I literally had to trust my team with my life, zero micromanagement. And I think empowering a team to perform and have ownership over their specific domain is where it's really powerful. So I would say to organizers and leaders, make it a priority to highlight the unseen wins and people. Create feedback loops where the behind the scenes team can actually see the direct impact of their work in real time and then they feel much more part of it. And trust your team. Trust your team with the result you need and let them use their expertise to build the path to get there. Don't tell them what the path is. So I think, you know, so making them much more an integral part of the success is key.
I love that. And exactly how to be also vulnerable and let loose, like lean on them and trust that they will take care of what needs to be taken care of. It's quite powerful. So tell me, what's next for you? I know one of the things that's next for you is APAC's event. PCMA APAC will have you as a keynote, but what else is there?
Yes, so I'm excited, and that will come after my next run. So I'm going back on International Women's Day to start my run. I'm going back to try and break my world record, which is
Wow.
fastest time on foot Malaysia Peninsula. So at the moment, my record is 8 days, 46 minutes. I'm trying to get it down to 7 days. So that will mean running about 105, 110 kilometers a day. So
Wow.
yeah, we'll see. But yeah, the pressure is real. But obviously running for a cause again to create some change in different communities. Have my team with me and have a lot more people joining and hopefully, it will translate into doing some good in the world.
How are you engaging your community now? Are they prepping with you? What's the vibe?
Yeah, so everything is pretty much social led and and we're doing some in-person events in Singapore, but I'm starting now, to share what my preparation looks like. I'm very open and honest. I think after the first one, as we said, I'm an open book. Everyone's seen me cry on camera many times, so there's nothing left to hide. And I think it's talking about your fears and getting people to buy in and understanding why you're doing this too, so getting people to share my vision of, and they've seen in the past the children that we've impacted, and so reminding them that this actually is not just about me, but it's about creating social impact and having greater good in the community, and they too can be part of that.
What's your biggest fear?
Not finishing. Yeah, not finishing. So, as much as I said I take failure off the table, I'm scared of an injury or I'm scared of something that I can't control. But, here I am saying control the controllables, but it does sit in the back of my mind. So I just don't, I choose not to think about it more than anything and just put my head down and get on with it.
And I'm sure you're just focused on the prep that you need to do, and that's it. Everything else is tuned out.
Yes, exactly.
That's quite vulnerable of you saying that you have a fear of what's coming and it's just 4 weeks away. And vulnerability is a central part of your storytelling and leadership. So, for event leaders, how can vulnerability strengthen their impact, presence, or connection with attendees or staff?
Yeah, I think so. During Project 1000, I found vulnerability was actually my greatest tool for connection. It definitely was not a weakness. When I'm 600 kilometers into a run and covered in sweat, you can't hide your struggle. Being open about that pain, actually didn't make me look weak. It made me more relatable to others and more inspiring, they said. So I think when a leader admits, this is a massive challenge. I'm feeling the pressure too. It gives their team permission to be human as well, and it shifts that atmosphere from fear of failure to collective problem solving, and that's what we found in our team. People don't want to be lectured by this person on a pedestal that seems to have it all together. They want to be inspired by someone who's navigated some stuff that they can relate to. And vulnerability is that bridge that turns that spectator into a follower and into a team member. And I think for event leaders, admitting that you don't have all the answers empowers your team to really step up, and it strengthens your connection with them, and also validates their essential role in the project as well. So I think with all of those things, we're always told to toughen it up and brave face on, but I think sometimes open and honest conversations of what's needed and can create the most amazing results and the most amazing bonds.
I agree 100%. Every time when you see a leader who's saying, help me, it feels so much more human, right? You're so much more connected. Well, was there anything we didn't mention we definitely should before we wrap up, you think?
No, I think, if people wanna follow along before I get to meet everyone in person, they can do it my social media, which is just Natalie Dau, and they'll get a sneak peek into some of the topics that we'll be covering in my keynote during the conference. So I'm excited to meet everyone in person.
That's lovely. And I'll definitely include links to your website and an account so people can quickly find all the information they need and how to follow you. Well, Natalie, that was lovely. Thank you so much for all the energy and inspiration. And good luck. Keeping my fingers crossed that you finish exactly as you envision it.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure too. Thank you. Remember to subscribe to the Convene podcast on your favorite listening platform to stay updated with our latest episodes. For further industry insights from the Convene team, head over to pcma.org/convene. My name is Maggie. Stay inspired, keep inspiring, and until next time.